The man sat on the cold concrete sidewalk. His back was against the tall glass windows of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The hotel was one of the most expensive in New York City. Rich people walked in and out of its golden doors all day long. The man looked nothing like those rich people. His clothes were old and dirty. His jacket had holes in it. His pants were torn at the knees. His shoes were so worn out that his toes almost showed through them. His hair was long and messy. His beard was thick and gray. It looked like he had not cut it in months. But there was something different about this man. While other homeless people on the street looked sad or angry, he looked calm. He was reading a book. It was an old paperback book about business. The pages were yellow and some were falling out. But he read it like it was the most important thing in the world. People walked past him all day. Some dropped coins into the small cup next to him. He always said thank you in a quiet voice. Some people looked at him with disgust. Others pretended not to see him at all. But the man just kept reading his book. Around noon, a woman in an expensive dress walked out of the hotel. She saw the man sitting there. Her face twisted with anger. She walked back into the hotel and went straight to the front desk. "There is a homeless man sitting right outside your hotel," she said to the man behind the desk. "This is disgusting. I pay good money to stay here. I should not have to see people like that when I walk outside." The hotel manager was worried. He did not want to lose customers. "I am very sorry, ma'am. We will take care of this right away," he said. He picked up the phone and called the police. "Hello, this is the Grand Plaza Hotel," he said into the phone. "We have a vagrant outside our building. He is making our guests uncomfortable. Can you please send someone to remove him?" The police station was only 6 blocks away. 2 police officers got the call. Officer Mike Rodriguez was 28 years old. He had been a police officer for 5 years. Officer Tom Walsh was older. He was 42 and had been a cop for 15 years. Both men were tired. It had been a long day. "Another homeless guy," Rodriguez said as they got into their police car. "Why can't these people just go to the shelters?" "Because they are lazy," Walsh replied. "They think they can just sit anywhere they want and make normal people uncomfortable." They drove to the hotel. They could see the man from their car. He was still sitting in the same spot, still reading his book. A few people had stopped to talk to him. He seemed to be having a nice conversation with an old lady. She gave him a sandwich and he thanked her with a big smile. The officers got out of their car. They walked over to the man. He looked up from his book when he saw their shadows fall over him. "Good afternoon, officers," the man said. His voice was calm and polite. "How can I help you today?" Rodriguez was surprised. Most homeless people were rude to cops or tried to run away. This man seemed almost happy to see them. "You need to move along," Rodriguez said. "You can't sit here." The man looked confused. "I am sorry, but I thought this was a public sidewalk," he said. "Am I breaking any laws by sitting here?" Walsh did not like this response. He thought the man was trying to be smart with them. "Listen, buddy," he said in a loud voice. "We got a call that you are bothering people. So you need to get up and leave. Now." The man closed his book carefully. He put it in a small bag next to him. "Officers, I understand you have a job to do," he said. "But I am not bothering anyone. I am just sitting here reading. I am waiting for someone to pick me up." "Yeah, right," Rodriguez said. "Who is going to pick up a bum like you?" The man's face did not change. He stayed calm. "A friend of mine is coming to get me," he said. "She should be here soon. Would it be okay if I waited for her?" More people were starting to notice what was happening. Some stopped to watch. Others took out their phones and started recording. The officers did not like having an audience. "I don't care who you are waiting for," Walsh said. "You need to move right now." "This is private property." The man shook his head gently. "No, officer. This sidewalk is public property. I checked the city laws before I sat down here. I have the right to be here as long as I'm not blocking traffic or causing trouble." Walsh's face turned red. He hated it when people questioned his authority, especially homeless people. "Are you a lawyer now?" he yelled. "You think you know the law better than we do?" The man stayed calm. "I am not trying to cause any trouble," he said. "I am just waiting for my ride. I will be gone soon." Rodriguez stepped closer to the man. "Look, we are trying to be nice here, but if you don't move, we are going to have to arrest you." "On what charges?" the man asked. His voice was still polite, but now some people in the crowd were paying more attention. "Loitering," Walsh said. Disturbing the peace. Take your pick. The man reached into his jacket pocket. Both officers jumped back and put their hands on their guns. Don't move, Rodriguez shouted. The man froze. I was just getting my reading glasses, he said slowly. They are in my pocket, but it was too late. The officers were already angry and scared. Walsh grabbed the man's arm. Get up, you are under arrest. The man did not fight back, but he also did not stand up fast enough for the officers. Rodriguez grabbed his other arm. Together they pulled him to his feet. Please, officers, the man said. There is no need for this. I was not doing anything wrong. But Walsh and Rodriguez were not listening anymore. They were focused on showing everyone who was in charge. The crowd was getting bigger. More people were recording with their phones. The man looked around at all the people watching. He saw fear in some faces. He saw anger in others. He knew what was about to happen. He had seen it on the news many times before, but he never thought it would happen to him. Please, he said one more time, just let me call my friend. She can explain everything. Walsh pushed him toward their police car. You can make your phone call at the station, he said. The man did not resist. He walked quietly between the two officers. But inside he was thinking about his daughter. She had always told him to treat everyone with respect no matter who they were. He wondered what she would think if she could see him now. The crowd followed them to the police car. People were shouting at the officers. He was not doing anything wrong. Someone yelled, "Leave him alone." But the officers did not care what the crowd thought. They put the man in the back of their car and drove away. The man sat quietly in the back seat. He was not angry. He was not scared. He was thinking about how much the world had changed since he had been living on the streets. And he was thinking about what he would do when this was all over. The police car stopped at a red light 6 blocks from the hotel. In the back seat, the man sat quietly. His hands were behind his back in handcuffs. He looked out the window at the people walking on the sidewalk. They all looked busy and important. None of them looked at the police car. Officer Rodriguez looked in the mirror at the man. "What is your name?" he asked. "Jonathan," the man replied. "Jonathan what?" Officer Walsh asked. The man was quiet for a moment. "Just Jonathan," he said. Walsh turned around in his seat. "Listen, smart guy. You think you are better than us because you know some big words about the law. But you are just another bum on the street." Jonathan did not answer. He was thinking about his daughter again. Her name was Sarah. She had been a lawyer before she died. She always fought for people who could not fight for themselves. She would have been proud of him for staying calm. The light turned green and they started driving again. But then Walsh's radio made a loud noise. The dispatcher's voice came through. "All units, we have a robbery in progress at 5th Avenue and 42nd Street. Need backup immediately." Rodriguez looked at Walsh. "That's only 2 blocks from here." Walsh nodded. "Let's go check it out first. We can drop this guy off at the station later." They turned the car around and drove toward the robbery. When they got there, they saw other police cars already at the scene. The robbers were already caught. They were not needed. "Damn," Rodriguez said. "We missed all the action." Walsh was frustrated too. He had been hoping for some excitement. Dealing with homeless people was boring. "Let's just get this over with," he said. They drove back toward the police station, but when they were still 3 blocks away, they stopped the car. Walsh got out and opened the back door. "Get out," he told Jonathan. Jonathan was confused. "Are we at the police station?" he asked. "Just get out," Walsh said again. Jonathan stepped out of the car. They were on a quiet street. There were not many people around. A few people were walking their dogs. Some were sitting on benches in a small park across the street. Rodriguez got out of the car too. He took out his baton. "You know what, Jonathan? I don't like your attitude." Jonathan looked at both officers. He could see the anger in their eyes. He had seen that look before, but never directed at him. "Officers, I have not done anything to disrespect you," he said. "Yes, you have," Walsh said. "You think you are smarter than us. You think you can quote the law to us like we are stupid." "That was not my intention," Jonathan said. "I apologize if I offended you." But the apology made Walsh even more angry. "Now you are being fake with us," he said. "First you act like a smart guy, now you want to be nice." Jonathan realized that nothing he said would help. These men had already decided what they thought about him. They saw a dirty homeless man, and that was all they could see. Rodriguez stepped closer. "Put your hands on the car," he ordered. Jonathan did what he was told. He put his hands on the roof of the police car. The handcuffs made it uncomfortable, but he did not complain. Walsh started searching through Jonathan's small bag. Inside were the old book, a bottle of water, some crackers, and a cell phone. The phone was expensive, but it was in a cracked case. "Where did you steal this phone?" Walsh asked. "I did not steal it," Jonathan replied. "It is mine." Rodriguez hit Jonathan in the back with his baton. It was not hard enough to seriously hurt him, but it was enough to make him stumble forward. "Don't lie to us," Rodriguez said. "Homeless people don't have phones like this." Jonathan straightened up. His back hurt where he had been hit. "I am not lying," he said. "That phone belongs to me." Across the street, an old man walking his dog stopped to watch. He could see that something was wrong. He took out his own phone and started recording. Walsh saw the old man with the phone. "Hey!" he yelled. "Mind your own business." The old man did not stop recording. "This is a public street," he called back. "I can record whatever I want." Now Walsh was even more angry. He did not like being recorded. It made him feel like he was doing something wrong. But he was not doing anything wrong, he told himself. He was just dealing with a criminal. "Turn around," Walsh told Jonathan. Jonathan turned around slowly. Walsh pushed him hard against the car. Jonathan's face hit the metal roof. His nose started bleeding. "Please," Jonathan said. "You don't have to do this." But Rodriguez was already angry too. He saw the blood on Jonathan's face and it made him feel powerful. "You should have just moved when we told you to," he said. More people were starting to notice. A woman with a baby stroller stopped walking. A man getting out of his car stood and watched. They all took out their phones. Walsh saw all the phones pointed at them. "Everyone needs to step back," he yelled. "This is police business." But the people did not step back. They stayed where they were and kept recording. Jonathan could feel the blood from his nose running down his face. It dripped onto his old jacket. He thought about how his daughter would feel if she could see him now. Not because he was being hurt, but because other people were being hurt by watching this happen. Rodriguez grabbed Jonathan's arm and twisted it behind his back. The handcuffs cut into his wrists. "You are under arrest for resisting arrest," he said. "I am not resisting," Jonathan said quietly. "Yes, you are," Walsh said. He pushed Jonathan down to the ground. Jonathan fell hard on his knees. The concrete scraped through his old pants. "Stop!" someone yelled from across the street. "He is not fighting back." But the officers did not stop. Rodriguez kicked Jonathan in the side. Jonathan fell over onto his back. He looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful blue day. His daughter had loved days like this. Walsh took out a can of pepper spray. "This will teach you to respect police officers," he said. He sprayed it directly into Jonathan's face. Jonathan's eyes burned like fire. He could not breathe. He started coughing and choking. "Please," he gasped. "I can't breathe." Rodriguez hit him with the baton again, this time in the leg. Jonathan cried out in pain. The crowd was getting bigger now. People were yelling at the officers to stop. Someone called 911 to report police brutality. Others were posting the videos on social media in real time. "You are killing him," a woman screamed. Walsh looked up at the crowd. Their faces were full of anger and disgust. For a moment he wondered if he was going too far, but then he looked down at Jonathan, coughing and bleeding on the ground. And he felt justified again. This man was resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer, Walsh announced to the crowd. Jonathan tried to speak, but he was still choking from the pepper spray. His eyes were swollen shut. His whole body hurt. Rodriguez pulled him up off the ground. Jonathan could barely stand. His legs were shaking. "Let's get him to the station," Rodriguez said. They put Jonathan back in the car. He slumped against the seat, still coughing. His face was covered in blood and tears from the pepper spray. As they drove away, Jonathan could hear the crowd behind them. They were angry. They were shouting. They wanted justice. Jonathan closed his swollen eyes and tried to breathe. He thought about his daughter again. She had always believed that good people would do the right thing when it mattered. He hoped she was right. The car pulled into the police station parking lot. Jonathan knew that his real life was about to collide with the life he had been living on the streets. And he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The police station smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. Jonathan sat on a hard metal bench in a small room. His face was still swollen from the pepper spray. His nose had stopped bleeding, but it was crooked now. His ribs hurt every time he took a breath. A police officer Jonathan had never seen before came into the room. This officer was older and looked tired. His name tag said Sergeant Martinez. "What happened to your face?" Martinez asked. Jonathan looked at him carefully. "I was pepper sprayed and beaten by 2 of your officers." Martinez wrote something on his clipboard. "Officers Rodriguez and Walsh said you were resisting arrest and you attacked them." "That is not true," Jonathan said quietly. Martinez had heard this before. Every person who got arrested said they were innocent. "Save it for your lawyer," he said. "You get 1 phone call. Who do you want to call?" Jonathan thought for a moment. He could call his brother. He could call his personal doctor. He could call the head of his security team. But there was only one person who could handle this situation properly. "I would like to call Margaret Chen," he said. "Is she your lawyer?" Martinez asked. "Yes," Jonathan replied. Martinez handed him an old phone that was attached to the wall with a metal cord. "You have 5 minutes," he said. Jonathan dialed a number he knew by heart. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. "Chen Law Office, this is Margaret speaking." "Hello, Margaret. This is Jonathan." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Margaret's voice came back, but now it sounded worried and excited. "Jonathan? Oh my God, where are you? We have been looking for you for 3 months. The whole company is falling apart. The board of directors is going crazy. Your brother has been—" "Margaret," Jonathan interrupted gently. "I need you to listen to me carefully. I am at the police station on 5th Street. I have been arrested." "Arrested? What for?" "The officers say I was loitering and resisting arrest. But that is not important right now. I need you to come here immediately and handle this situation." Margaret was already grabbing her car keys and her briefcase. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Jonathan looked at his reflection in the small mirror on the wall. His face looked terrible. "I will be fine. But Margaret, there is something else. The board meeting is supposed to be today at 3 o'clock, isn't it?" "Yes, but Jonathan, we can cancel—" "No," Jonathan said firmly. "I will be there. Just get me out of here first." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Margaret said. "Don't say anything to anyone until I arrive." Jonathan hung up the phone. Sergeant Martinez was writing on his clipboard again. "Your lawyer is coming?" Martinez asked. "Yes, she will be here soon." Martinez nodded and left the room. Jonathan sat back down on the metal bench. He closed his eyes and thought about the last 3 months. After his daughter Sarah died in the car accident, Jonathan's whole world fell apart. For 25 years, he had built one of the biggest companies in America. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He had houses all over the world and a private jet and everything money could buy. But none of that mattered when he got the phone call that Sarah was dead. The funeral was the worst day of his life. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Business partners, politicians, celebrities. Everyone wanted to shake his hand and tell him how sorry they were. But Jonathan felt like he was watching it all from far away. After the funeral, he locked himself in his office for 2 weeks. He did not eat. He barely slept. His assistant brought him food, but he left it untouched. His brother came to check on him every day, but Jonathan would not see him. Then one morning, Jonathan looked out his office window at the city below. He saw all the people walking on the sidewalks. They looked so small from the 40th floor. He realized he had no idea what their lives were like. Sarah had always told him that he lived in a bubble. "Dad," she would say, "you don't know how most people really live. You should get out more and see the real world." But Jonathan had always been too busy making money and building his empire. Now Sarah was gone and he would never get another chance to understand what she meant. That day he walked out of his office. He did not tell his assistant where he was going. He did not take his wallet or his credit cards. He just walked out onto the street. For the first week, he slept in his car. Then he gave the car to a homeless man he met in a park. He started sleeping in shelters and on park benches. He learned how to find free food and clean bathrooms. He learned which streets were safe at night and which ones were dangerous. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. But it was also the most important. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to have nothing. He understood what it felt like when people looked at you like you were worthless. The door opened and Sergeant Martinez came back in. "Your lawyer called," he said. "She is in the parking lot. She wants to talk to you." Jonathan nodded, but before he could stand up, Martinez sat down next to him on the bench. "Listen," Martinez said quietly. I have been a cop for 20 years. I have seen a lot of things. What happened to you today? That was not right. Jonathan looked at him with surprise. I watched the videos, Martinez continued. People posted them on Facebook and Twitter. You were not resisting arrest. Those officers went too far. What will happen to them? Jonathan asked. Martinez shrugged. Probably nothing. Maybe they will get a warning. Maybe they will have to take some classes about proper procedures, but they won't lose their jobs. Jonathan felt sad but not surprised. He had learned a lot about injustice in the past 3 months. But I want you to know, Martinez said, not all cops are like Rodriguez and Walsh. Some of us try to do the right thing. Before Jonathan could reply, the door opened again. A woman in an expensive black suit walked in. She had long black hair and sharp eyes behind designer glasses. She looked like she could take on the whole police department by herself. Margaret, Jonathan said with a small smile. Margaret looked at Jonathan's battered face and her eyes filled with anger. What did they do to you? It's nothing, Jonathan said. It's not nothing. Margaret turned to Sergeant Martinez. I want to see your supervisor immediately. I want copies of all arrest reports, and I want the names of every officer involved in this incident. Martinez stood up quickly. Margaret had a way of making people nervous. Yes, ma'am. Right away. After Martinez left, Margaret sat down next to Jonathan. Her angry expression changed to one of relief and worry. Jonathan, everyone has been so scared. We thought maybe you were dead. The FBI was looking for you. Private investigators. Your brother hired the best people in the country. I know, Jonathan said. I'm sorry I worried everyone, but I needed to do this. Margaret looked at his torn clothes and his injured face. Was it worth it? Jonathan thought about all the people he had met on the street. The other homeless people who shared their food with him even though they had almost nothing. The shelter workers who treated everyone with kindness. The ordinary people who stopped to give him money or just to say hello. He also thought about people like Officers Rodriguez and Walsh. People who saw him as less than human because of how he looked. Yes, he said finally. It was worth it. Outside the police station, news reporters were starting to gather. Someone had recognized Jonathan from the arrest videos. Word was spreading that the homeless man who got beaten by police was actually Jonathan Blackwood, one of the richest men in America. By the time Margaret and Jonathan walked out of the police station, there were 50 reporters waiting for them. Cameras flashed and microphones were pushed toward Jonathan's face. Mr. Blackwood, why were you living on the streets? Are you going to sue the police department? How does it feel to be treated like a criminal? Margaret pushed through the crowd without saying a word. She helped Jonathan into her car and they drove away. But the story was just beginning. In a few hours, it would be on every news channel in the country, and nothing would ever be the same again. Margaret drove through the busy streets of Manhattan. Jonathan sat in the passenger seat looking out the window. Everything looked different now that he was in a car again. The building seemed taller. The people on the sidewalks looked smaller and farther away. Where do you want to go first? Margaret asked. Your penthouse? The office? Maybe the hospital to get checked out. Jonathan touched his swollen nose. It probably was broken. His ribs still hurt when he breathed. But he had lived with worse pain on the streets. Take me to the office, he said. The board meeting is in 2 hours. I need to clean up and get ready. Margaret looked at him like he was crazy. Jonathan, you have been missing for 3 months. You just got beaten up by police. You don't have to go to any meeting today. Yes, I do, Jonathan said quietly. I have been gone too long. The company needs me. They drove to the Blackwood Industries building. It was a tall glass tower in the middle of the financial district. Jonathan had not seen it in 3 months. It looked exactly the same, but somehow it felt different to him now. They parked in Jonathan's private parking spot in the underground garage. Margaret used her keycard to open the elevator that went directly to the executive floor. When the elevator doors opened, they saw Jonathan's assistant, Patricia. She was a woman in her 50s who had worked for Jonathan for 15 years. When she saw him, she dropped the paper she was holding and started to cry. Mr. Blackwood, she said, oh my God, you're alive. We were so worried about you. She ran over and hugged him. Jonathan hugged her back. It felt good to be around someone who cared about him. I'm sorry I disappeared, Patricia, he said. I know it was hard for everyone. Patricia looked at his face and saw the bruises and cuts. What happened to you? Who did this? It's a long story, Jonathan said. Is my brother here? Yes, he's in the conference room with the other board members. They're trying to figure out what to do about the company. Some people want to declare you legally dead. Jonathan nodded. He was not surprised. When the CEO of a major company disappears for 3 months, people start to panic. Can you call him and tell him I'm here? But don't tell the others yet. I want to talk to him first. Patricia picked up her phone and called David Blackwood, Jonathan's younger brother. David had been running the company while Jonathan was gone. David, you need to come to Jonathan's office right now. No, I can't tell you why over the phone. Just come now. 5 minutes later, David Blackwood walked into Jonathan's office. He was a tall man with short brown hair and an expensive suit. When he saw Jonathan, he stopped walking and stared. Jesus Christ, David said. Is that really you? Jonathan stood up from behind his desk. Hello, David. David rushed over and hugged his brother. We thought you were dead, he said. The police said maybe you killed yourself. They found your car in that bad neighborhood and thought maybe someone murdered you. I gave the car away, Jonathan explained, to someone who needed it more than I did. David stepped back and looked at Jonathan's clothes and his injured face. Where the hell have you been? And what happened to your face? Jonathan sat down in his chair. It felt strange to be behind his big desk again. I've been living on the streets. And this morning I was arrested and beaten by police officers. David's mouth fell open. You've been homeless? For 3 months. Why? Jonathan looked out the window at the city below. After Sarah died, I realized I didn't know anything about the real world. I needed to understand how most people live. So you just disappeared? Do you know what that did to the company? Our stock price dropped 30%. We almost lost the Johnson contract. The board of directors wanted to have you declared dead so they could choose a new CEO. Jonathan could hear the anger in his brother's voice, but he could also hear relief. I'm sorry, Jonathan said. I know it was selfish, but I had to do it. Margaret had been standing quietly by the door. Now she spoke up. David, we have bigger problems right now. The arrest this morning was filmed. People are posting the videos online. In a few hours, every news station in the country will know that Jonathan Blackwood was beaten by police. David sat down in one of the chairs across from Jonathan's desk. This is a disaster. The company can't survive a scandal like this. It doesn't have to be a scandal, Jonathan said. It can be an opportunity. An opportunity? Jonathan, you look like you got hit by a truck. How is that an opportunity? Jonathan stood up and walked to the window. Down below, he could see people walking on the sidewalks. Some of them were probably homeless, but from this high up, they all looked the same. David, do you know how many homeless people there are in this city? I don't know. A few thousand? 60,000, Jonathan said. And do you know how many times police use unnecessary force against people who can't fight back? David was getting confused. Jonathan, what does this have to do with our company? Jonathan turned around to face his brother. Everything. For 3 months, I lived with people who have nothing. I saw how they are treated by society, by police, by people like us. He walked back to his desk and picked up a framed photo of his daughter Sarah. Sarah always told me that rich people have a responsibility to help others. I never listened to her. I was too busy making money. So what are you saying? David asked. I'm saying that what happened to me today happens to poor people every day. But when it happens to them, nobody cares. When it happens to a billionaire, everyone pays attention. Margaret was starting to understand. You want to use this situation to bring attention to police brutality and homelessness. Exactly, Jonathan said. Instead of trying to hide what happened, we're going to talk about it. We're going to use the company's influence to make changes. David shook his head. The board of directors will never approve that. They'll say you've lost your mind. They might try to remove you as CEO. Jonathan smiled for the first time since he had been arrested. Then we'll see who's really in charge of this company. There was a knock on the door. Patricia came in looking worried. Mr. Blackwood, there are reporters outside the building. Lots of them. They're asking questions about you being arrested. Jonathan looked at Margaret. How long until the board meeting? 1 hour, she replied. That's enough time. Jonathan walked toward the door that connected his office to his private bathroom. I need to shower and change clothes. Patricia, can you have someone bring me a suit from my apartment? Of course, Mr. Blackwood. And Patricia? Call all the board members. Tell them the meeting is still happening at 3 o'clock. Tell them I will be there, and I have important news about the future of the company. After Jonathan went into the bathroom, David turned to Margaret. Is he crazy? He's talking about turning this into some kind of social justice campaign. Margaret had known Jonathan for 10 years. She had never seen him like this before. But she could see something in his eyes that had not been there before he disappeared. A sense of purpose, maybe, she said. But maybe that's exactly what this company needs. In the bathroom, Jonathan looked at himself in the mirror. His face was a mess. His nose was definitely broken. He had bruises all over his body. But his eyes looked more alive than they had in years. He thought about all the homeless people he had met in the past 3 months. People like Tommy, who shared his sandwich with Jonathan even though it was the only food Tommy had. People like Maria, who gave Jonathan her blanket on a cold night even though she was sick. Those people deserved better. They deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. And now Jonathan had the power to do something about it. He turned on the shower and began to wash away 3 months of life on the streets. But he would never wash away what he had learned there. Outside the building, more reporters were arriving. News vans lined the street. Photographers waited for Jonathan to appear. The story was spreading across the internet faster than anyone could control it. Billionaire beaten was trending on Twitter. The videos of his arrest had been viewed millions of times, but this was just the beginning. In 1 hour, Jonathan Blackwood would walk into that boardroom and change everything, and the world was watching. The boardroom was on the 40th floor of the Blackwood Industries building. 12 men and women sat around a long mahogany table. These were some of the most powerful business people in America. They owned banks, oil companies, and technology firms. Together they controlled billions of dollars, but today they all looked worried and confused. Jonathan walked into the room wearing a clean black suit and a blue tie. His face was still swollen and bruised, but he had combed his hair and shaved his beard. He looked like the CEO they remembered except for the obvious signs of his beating. Everyone stared at him as he walked to his chair at the head of the table. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Margaret Chen entered the room behind him and closed the door. She sat in a chair against the wall, ready to take notes. "Good afternoon, everyone," Jonathan said as he sat down. "I apologize for my long absence." Robert Harrison, the chairman of the board, was the first to speak. He was 70 years old and had been in business longer than anyone in the room. "Jonathan, where the hell have you been?" Harrison demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this company? Our stock price has crashed. We've lost major contracts. Some of our biggest investors are pulling out." Jonathan nodded calmly. "I understand your concerns, Robert, and I take full responsibility for the problems my absence has caused." "Taking responsibility isn't enough," said Linda Martinez, who ran one of the largest advertising agencies in New York. "We need explanations. We need to know that you're mentally stable enough to run this company." Jonathan looked around the table at all the faces staring at him. These people had known him for years. They had made millions of dollars together, but he could see in their eyes that they were ready to get rid of him if necessary. "3 months ago, my daughter Sarah was killed in a car accident," he began. Several board members nodded. They had all been at the funeral. "After Sarah died, I went through the darkest period of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything except how much I missed her." The room was completely quiet now. Even Harrison stopped looking impatient. "Sarah was the most important thing in my world," Jonathan continued. "She was smart and kind, and she cared about people. She always told me that I lived in a bubble. She said I didn't understand how real people lived their lives." Jonathan paused and took a sip of water from the glass in front of him. "After the funeral, I kept thinking about what she said. I realized that she was right. I had spent my whole life making money and building this company, but I had never taken the time to understand the world outside these walls." "So you decided to disappear?" asked James Chen, Linda's business partner. "You just walked away from everything?" "Yes," Jonathan said simply. "I walked out of my office one morning and I didn't come back." David Blackwood, who was sitting to Jonathan's right, leaned forward. "You could have taken a vacation. You could have gone to therapy. You didn't have to vanish without telling anyone." Jonathan turned to his brother. "A vacation wouldn't have taught me what I needed to learn. Therapy couldn't show me what I needed to see." "And what was that exactly?" Harrison asked sarcastically. "How the other half lives," Jonathan replied. "How people survive when they don't have money or power or connections." He stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the city looked busy and prosperous. But Jonathan now knew that there were thousands of people down there who were struggling just to survive. "For 3 months I lived on the streets," he said without turning around. "I slept in shelters and parks. I ate at soup kitchens. I learned what it's like to have nothing." The board members looked at each other with shocked expressions. Linda Martinez was the first to speak. "You chose to be homeless? That's the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard." Jonathan turned back to face the table. Was it irresponsible? Or was it the most important education I've ever received? "Jonathan," Harrison said in a tired voice, "I understand that you were grieving, but you can't run a company if you're going to have mental breakdowns every time something bad happens." "I didn't have a mental breakdown," Jonathan said firmly. "I made a deliberate choice to learn something that I needed to know." He sat back down at the table and looked at each board member individually. "Do any of you know how many homeless people live in this city?" No one answered. 60,000, Jonathan said. "Do any of you know what it's like to be hungry for days at a time? To have people look at you like you're not even human? To be afraid of the police instead of feeling protected by them?" "That's very sad," said Thomas Wu, who owned several technology companies. "But what does it have to do with running Blackwood Industries?" Jonathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his cell phone. On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Billionaire CEO beaten by police while homeless." "This morning, I was sitting outside a hotel reading a book," he said. "2 police officers told me to move. When I politely explained that I was waiting for a ride, they arrested me." He touched his swollen nose. "Then they beat me. They pepper sprayed me. They treated me like I was garbage." The room was silent again. "But here's the important part," Jonathan continued. "This happens to poor people every single day. The only difference is that when it happens to them, nobody cares. When it happens to me, it makes national news." Margaret spoke up from her chair by the wall. "The video of Jonathan's arrest has been viewed 15 million times in the past 4 hours. Every major news network is covering the story." Harrison rubbed his forehead like he had a headache. "This is a public relations nightmare." "No," Jonathan said. "This is an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Linda asked. Jonathan stood up again and began pacing around the room. "An opportunity to use our influence to make real changes. An opportunity to show that this company cares about more than just profits." He stopped pacing and looked directly at Harrison. "Robert, how much did this company make last year?" $47 billion, Harrison replied. "And how much of that did we spend on charitable giving?" Harrison was quiet for a moment. "About 50 million, Jonathan nodded. "Less than 1%. Sarah always said that was embarrassing. She said that people with our resources have a responsibility to help others." David spoke up. "Jonathan, we already donate more money than most companies. We can't solve every problem in the world." "We're not trying to solve every problem," Jonathan said. "But we can solve some problems. We can make a real difference." Thomas Wu was getting impatient. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jonathan sat back down and pulled out a folder that Margaret had prepared for him. "I'm proposing that we create the Sarah Blackwood Foundation," he said. "We're going to dedicate $1 billion to fighting homelessness and police brutality." Several board members gasped. $1 billion was a lot of money even for Blackwood Industries. "Are you insane?" Harrison asked. "Our shareholders will revolt, will they?" Jonathan asked. "Or will they be proud to own stock in a company that stands for justice?" Linda shook her head. "This is exactly what I was worried about. You've lost perspective. 3 months on the streets has made you think you can change the world." Jonathan looked at her calmly. "Maybe I can't change the world, but I can change how this company operates, and I can make sure that what happened to me this morning doesn't happen to other people." He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I've already had Margaret draft the paperwork," he said. "The foundation will provide funding for homeless shelters, job training programs, and legal assistance for victims of police brutality." James Chen was reading over Jonathan's shoulder. "This will cost us billions of dollars over the next 10 years. And it will save thousands of lives," Jonathan replied. The room erupted in arguments. Some board members thought Jonathan had lost his mind. Others were worried about their stock prices. A few were interested in the proposal but concerned about the cost. Harrison banged his hand on the table to restore order. "Jonathan, I think you need to take some time to think about this. Maybe see a doctor. Get some rest." "I've never been thinking more clearly in my life," Jonathan said. He stood up and walked back to the window. Outside, he could see protesters starting to gather in the street. They were carrying signs that said "Justice for Jonathan" and "End Police Brutality." "Look down there," he said to the board members. "Those people are here because they saw what happened to me. But they're not just fighting for me. They're fighting for everyone who gets treated the way I was treated this morning." He turned back to face the table. "We can be part of the solution, or we can be part of the problem. But we can't pretend that these issues don't exist anymore." Margaret stood up from her chair. "The press conference is scheduled for 5 o'clock. Jonathan needs to know if the board supports the foundation before he speaks to the media." Harrison looked around the table at the other board members. Some of them nodded. Others shook their heads. A few looked uncertain. "We need to vote," Harrison said finally. Jonathan sat down and waited. His future and the future of thousands of homeless people depended on what happened in the next few minutes. The vote was 7 in favor and 5 against. It was closer than Jonathan had hoped, but it was enough. The Sarah Blackwood Foundation would become a reality. Robert Harrison was one of the 5 who voted against the proposal. After the meeting ended, he stayed behind to talk to Jonathan privately. "You know this is going to hurt the company," Harrison said. "Our competitors will use this against us. They'll say we're wasting money on social causes instead of focusing on business." Jonathan was putting his papers back in the folder. "Maybe some of our competitors will say that. But I think most people will respect us for taking a stand. And what if you're wrong? What if this foundation becomes a scandal? What if the media finds out about your 3 months on the streets and decides you're mentally unstable?" Jonathan looked at his old friend and business partner. They had known each other for 20 years. Harrison had helped him build Blackwood Industries from a small startup into one of the biggest companies in America. "Robert, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. This is what Sarah would have wanted." Harrison sighed and shook his head. "I hope you're right, Jonathan. For all our sakes." After Harrison left, Jonathan and Margaret walked down to the lobby of the building. Through the glass doors, they could see hundreds of reporters waiting outside. Camera crews from every major news network were there. Protesters were still marching in the street, holding signs and chanting slogans. "Are you ready for this?" Margaret asked. Jonathan touched his swollen face one more time. "In a few minutes, the whole world would see him like this. They would know that even a billionaire could be treated like garbage by the police." "I'm ready," he said. They walked outside into a storm of camera flashes and shouting reporters. Someone had set up a small podium with microphones from different news stations. Jonathan stepped up to the podium and the crowd became quiet. "Good evening," he said. "My name is Jonathan Blackwood. This morning, I was beaten and arrested by 2 police officers for the crime of sitting on a public sidewalk." The reporters immediately started shouting questions, but Jonathan held up his hand for silence. "I want to tell you why this happened and why it matters." For the next 30 minutes, Jonathan told his story. He talked about losing his daughter and deciding to live on the streets. He talked about the people he met and the things he learned. He talked about the police officers who treated him like he was not human. When he finished, the reporters exploded with questions. "Mr. Blackwood, are you going to sue the police department? How much money did you lose while you were gone? Do you think you're mentally fit to run a company?" Jonathan answered each question calmly and honestly. But the most important moment came when a young reporter from a local news station asked about his plans for the future. "Mr. Blackwood, what are you going to do now? Are you going back to business as usual?" Jonathan smiled. It was the first real smile he had given in months. "No," he said. "Business as usual is over. Today, Blackwood Industries announced the creation of the Sarah Blackwood Foundation. We are dedicating $1 billion to fight homelessness and police brutality in America." The crowd of reporters went crazy. Some were shouting new questions. Others were already calling their editors with the breaking news. But Jonathan was done talking for the day. Margaret helped him get through the crowd and into a waiting car. As they drove away, Jonathan looked back at the protesters who were still marching. Some of them waved at the car. Others held up signs thanking him for speaking out. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing," Margaret said, looking at her cell phone. "Interview requests from every talk show in America. The Washington Post wants to do a front-page story. Time magazine wants to put you on the cover." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. 3 months ago, he would have been excited about being on the cover of Time magazine. Now it seemed less important. "Set up interviews with people who will take the message seriously," he said. "I don't want this to become just another celebrity story. I want people to understand what's really happening on the streets." The next morning, Jonathan woke up in his penthouse apartment for the first time in 3 months. His bed was soft and warm. His bathroom had hot water and clean towels. His kitchen was full of expensive food, but he missed sleeping in the shelter. He missed the conversations with Tommy and Maria and the other homeless people who had become his friends. He turned on the television to watch the morning news. Every channel was talking about his story. Some reporters were supportive. They called him brave for speaking out about police brutality. Others were critical. They said he was just a rich man trying to get attention. But the story that mattered most was on a local news channel. Officers Rodriguez and Walsh had been suspended from the police department. An internal investigation was beginning. The police chief was promising a thorough review of all arrest procedures. Jonathan's phone rang. It was Margaret. "Have you seen the stock market this morning?" she asked. "No, how bad is it?" "Actually, it's not bad at all. Blackwood Industries stock is up 12%. Investors are calling the foundation announcement visionary leadership." Jonathan was surprised. He had expected the stock price to drop when people learned about the billion-dollar donation. "There's more good news," Margaret continued. 3 other major companies have announced similar foundations. They're following your lead." After he hung up, Jonathan got dressed and went down to the lobby of his building. His driver was waiting with the car, but Jonathan told him he would walk to the office instead. As he walked down the street, people recognized him. Some stopped to shake his hand and thank him for what he was doing. Others took pictures with their phones. A few called him crazy for giving away so much money, but the encounter that meant the most happened 2 blocks from his building. He saw a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk with a sign that said, "Hungry. Please help." Jonathan reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. As he handed it to the man, he recognized him. It was Tommy, one of the people he had lived with in the shelter. "Jonathan?" Tommy said with surprise. "Is that really you? I saw you on TV last night, but I couldn't believe it." Jonathan sat down on the sidewalk next to his friend. "Hello, Tommy, how are you doing?" Tommy laughed. "How am I doing? Man, I should be asking you that question. You're all over the news. They're saying you're worth billions of dollars." "The money doesn't matter," Jonathan said. "What matters is that people are talking about homelessness and police brutality. Maybe something will actually change." Tommy nodded. "It's already changing. 3 police officers came by the shelter yesterday, but instead of hassling us, they brought food and asked if we needed help with anything." Jonathan smiled. "It was a small change, but it was a start. Tommy, I want you to know that I'm going to make sure the new foundation helps people like you. Real help, not just handouts, but job training and housing and medical care." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do that, man. You already did more than enough just by telling people what it's really like out here." Jonathan stood up and shook Tommy's hand. "I'll see you around, my friend." As he walked away, Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt since before his daughter died. Hope. The police officers who beat him were facing consequences. Other companies were starting their own charitable foundations. Politicians were talking about police reform and homeless services, but most importantly, people were paying attention. The invisible had become visible. The voiceless had found their voice. And it all started with one man sitting on a sidewalk reading a book, waiting for his ride home. 6 weeks after the arrest, Jonathan sat in a small room at police headquarters. Across from him sat Internal Affairs Detective Sarah Wilson. She was a serious woman in her 40s who had investigated dozens of police brutality cases. "Mr. Blackwood, I want to thank you for agreeing to testify in this hearing," Detective Wilson said. "Your cooperation has been very helpful." Jonathan nodded. "I just want the truth to come out." The door opened and Officers Rodriguez and Walsh walked in with their lawyer. Both men looked uncomfortable. They avoided looking directly at Jonathan. Rodriguez had lost 15 pounds since the incident. He was having trouble sleeping and his wife was talking about divorce. The video of him beating a billionaire had been viewed over 50 million times on the internet. Everyone in his neighborhood knew who he was. Walsh looked even worse. His face was pale and he had dark circles under his eyes. He had been getting death threats from people who saw the arrest video. His own children were embarrassed to tell their friends that their father was a police officer. Their lawyer, a thin man named Peter Morrison, spoke first. "My clients want to express their sincere apologies for what happened that day. They were under stress and they made some poor decisions." Detective Wilson looked at the 2 officers. "Poor decisions? You pepper sprayed and beat a man who was not resisting arrest. A man who was sitting peacefully on a public sidewalk. We thought he was reaching for a weapon, Rodriguez said quietly. Jonathan leaned forward. Officer Rodriguez, what did you think I was reaching for? Rodriguez looked down at his hands. Your reading glasses. And did my reading glasses look like a weapon to you? No, sir. Detective Wilson opened a thick folder full of papers. Officers, this investigation has revealed some disturbing patterns in your behavior. Mr. Blackwood was not the first person you have used excessive force against. She pulled out several photographs. Last year you arrested Marcus Johnson, a 19-year-old college student. The charges against him were later dropped, but not before you broke 2 of his ribs. Walsh shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was different. He was fighting back. No, he wasn't, Detective Wilson said. We have video of that incident too. Just like with Mr. Blackwood, Marcus Johnson was not resisting. She pulled out more photos. 3 months before that, you arrested Lisa Martinez, a single mother walking home from work. You threw her to the ground so hard that she needed surgery on her shoulder. Jonathan felt sick as he looked at the photos. These officers had been hurting innocent people for years. The only reason anyone cared now was because they had hurt someone rich and famous. How many other people did you hurt? Jonathan asked. How many other people suffered because you thought you were above the law? Rodriguez started crying. I don't know. I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to get seriously hurt. But people did get hurt, Jonathan said. And you kept doing it. Detective Wilson continued going through the files. She had found 12 cases in the past 3 years where Rodriguez and Walsh had used unnecessary force. Most of the victims were poor. Some were homeless. None of them had the money or connections to fight back. Why should we believe you're sorry now? Jonathan asked. Are you sorry because you hurt people? Or are you sorry because you got caught? Walsh finally spoke up. Both, he said honestly. I know that sounds terrible, but it's the truth. We thought we were doing our jobs. We thought we were protecting people. Protecting people from what? Jonathan asked. From homeless men reading books? From college students walking home? From mothers trying to feed their families? The room was quiet for a long moment. I want to understand something, Jonathan continued. When you saw me sitting on that sidewalk, what did you see? Rodriguez looked up. I saw a vagrant. A troublemaker. Someone who didn't belong there. But I was just reading a book. Yes, sir. And when you saw Marcus Johnson walking home from college, what did you see? A black kid in a hoodie, in a neighborhood where there had been some break-ins. But he was just walking home from studying at the library. Rodriguez nodded. Yes, sir. Jonathan stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see protesters marching again. They came every day now, demanding justice and police reform. Do you understand what the problem is? Jonathan asked, turning back to face the officers. We made assumptions, Walsh said. We judged people based on how they looked. You saw what you expected to see, Jonathan said. Instead of seeing individual human beings, Detective Wilson closed the folder. Officers Rodriguez and Walsh, you are being terminated from the police department effective immediately. The district attorney is also considering criminal charges against both of you. Rodriguez broke down completely. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. Walsh just stared at the table. Is there anything else you want to say to Mr. Blackwood? Detective Wilson asked. Walsh looked up at Jonathan. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did. To you and to everyone else. Jonathan studied the officer's face. He could see genuine remorse there, but he could also see years of prejudice and bad training. Officer Walsh, do you have children? Yes, sir. 2 daughters. How old are they? 8 and 12. Jonathan walked back to the table and sat down. What would you do if someone treated your daughters the way you treated me? Walsh's eyes filled with tears. I would want to kill them. But you wouldn't have to, Jonathan said. Because if it happened to your daughters, the police would investigate. The officers would be fired. There would be justice, he leaned forward. The only reason there's justice in my case is because I'm rich. If I was still just another homeless man, you would still be on the streets with your badges and your guns. The hearing lasted another 2 hours. Jonathan answered questions about his arrest and about his time living on the streets. He talked about the other homeless people he had met and how they were treated by police and society. When it was over, Jonathan walked outside into the bright afternoon sun. Margaret was waiting for him by the car. How do you feel? She asked. Jonathan thought about the question. Sad, he said finally. Those officers' lives are ruined. Their families are suffering. But if we hadn't done this, they would have kept hurting people. They got in the car and drove toward the Blackwood Industries building. On the way, they passed several construction sites where new homeless shelters were being built with money from the Sarah Blackwood Foundation. The foundation has received over $300 million in donations from other companies and private citizens, Margaret said, reading from her tablet. And 12 major cities have announced police reform programs based on your recommendations. Jonathan nodded. But he was thinking about Marcus Johnson and Lisa Martinez and all the other victims whose names he didn't even know. That evening, Jonathan went to the shelter where he had lived for 3 months. He brought dinner for everyone and sat with his old friends. "How do you feel about those cops getting fired?" Tommy asked. Jonathan took a bite of his sandwich. "I feel like it was necessary, but I also feel like it's just the beginning." "What do you mean?" asked Maria, the woman who had given him her blanket on that cold night. "Firing 2 bad cops doesn't fix the whole system," Jonathan explained. "We need better training for all police officers. We need more programs to help homeless people. We need to change how society thinks about poverty." An older man named Frank had been listening quietly. "You really think things can change?" he asked. Jonathan looked around at all the faces in the shelter. These were good people who had fallen on hard times. They deserved better than they had gotten. "Yes," he said, "I think things can change. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take all of us working together." Outside the shelter, protesters were still marching. But now they weren't just angry about Jonathan's arrest. They were demanding broader changes to how police and society treated poor people. Change was slow, but it was happening. And Jonathan knew that his daughter Sarah would have been proud. 1 year later, Jonathan stood in front of a brand new building in downtown Manhattan. The sign above the door read, "Sarah Blackwood Community Center." Inside, there were job training programs, medical clinics, legal aid services, and temporary housing for people transitioning off the streets. It was the 10th center that the foundation had opened across the country. Each one was named after his daughter. "The ribbon-cutting ceremony starts in 10 minutes, Margaret said, checking her watch. "The mayor will be here, along with several city council members and the new police chief." Jonathan nodded. A lot had changed in the past year. The old police chief had resigned after the investigation into Rodriguez and Walsh revealed widespread problems in the department. The new chief was a woman named Carmen Rodriguez who had spent her career fighting police corruption. "Is Tommy here yet?" Jonathan asked. "He's inside with the other speakers," Margaret replied. Tommy had become one of the most effective advocates for homeless rights in the city. The foundation had paid for him to get clean clothes, medical treatment, and job training. Now he worked as a counselor, helping other homeless people navigate the system. Jonathan walked into the community center. The main room was filled with people. Some were reporters and politicians. Others were social workers and volunteers. But the people Jonathan was most happy to see were the homeless men and women who had gathered to celebrate the opening. Maria was there, wearing a new dress. The foundation had helped her get into a drug treatment program and find a job at a local restaurant. She now had her own apartment and was saving money to bring her children to live with her. Frank was there too. He was 72 years old and had been living on the streets for 8 years. The foundation had found him a small, studio apartment and enrolled him in a program that provided meals and medical care for elderly homeless people. But the person Jonathan was most proud to see was Marcus Johnson, the college student who had been beaten by Rodriguez and Walsh 2 years earlier. Marcus was now a law student and worked part-time for the foundation, helping other victims of police brutality. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus said, walking up to shake Jonathan's hand. "Thank you for making this possible." "Thank you for your courage," Jonathan replied. "You could have stayed quiet about what happened to you. Instead, you testified and helped make sure those officers faced consequences." The ceremony began with speeches from the mayor and other officials. They talked about the importance of helping homeless people and reforming police practices. Jonathan listened politely, but he was more interested in what Tommy had to say. When Tommy took the microphone, the room became quiet. A year ago, he had been living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Now he was addressing some of the most powerful people in the city. "1 year ago, I was invisible," Tommy said. "People walked past me every day like I didn't exist. Police officers saw me as a problem to be solved, not as a human being who needed help. He paused and looked directly at Jonathan. Then I met a man who was living on the streets just like me. He shared his food with me. He listened to my stories. He treated me like I mattered. Tommy's voice got stronger. I didn't know he was rich. I didn't know he was famous. All I knew was that he was kind to me when most people weren't. He gestured to the crowd. When those police officers beat him, they thought they were beating just another homeless person. They thought no one would care. They were wrong. The room erupted in applause. Jonathan felt tears in his eyes. Tommy continued. But the most important thing is that Mr. Blackwood didn't just get angry and move on with his life. He used what happened to him to help all of us. He gave us a voice. When Tommy finished speaking, Jonathan took the microphone. He looked out at the crowd of faces staring at him. Some were familiar. Others were strangers. But all of them represented hope for the future. 18 months ago, I lost my daughter Sarah in a car accident. He began. I thought my life was over. I thought nothing would ever matter again. He paused and looked at the banner hanging behind the podium. It had a photo of Sarah on it, along with the words, "Dignity for all." Sarah always believed that everyone deserved to be treated with respect, regardless of how much money they had or where they came from. She believed that people with privilege had a responsibility to help those without it. Jonathan walked closer to the crowd. When I decided to live on the streets, I wasn't trying to be noble or heroic. I was just trying to understand something that my daughter had been trying to teach me for years. He spotted several former Blackwood Industries board members in the audience. Some of them had opposed the foundation at first, but now they were proud of what the company had accomplished. I learned that there are two kinds of people in this world, Jonathan continued. Those who see homeless people as human beings deserving of help and respect, and those who see them as problems to be ignored or removed. He looked toward the back of the room where he saw two familiar faces. Former officers Rodriguez and Walsh were standing quietly near the door. Both men had served 6 months in jail for assault. Now they were working as volunteers for a police reform organization. I also learned that people can change, Jonathan said. Even people who have done terrible things can find redemption if they're willing to do the hard work. After the ceremony, Jonathan walked outside to get some fresh air. The street that had once been full of homeless people was now clean and safe. The new community center had given people a place to go for help, instead of having to sleep on the sidewalks. Rodriguez approached him carefully. "Mr. Blackwood, could I speak with you for a moment?" Jonathan turned to face the man who had beaten him over a year ago. Rodriguez looked different now. He had lost weight and his hair was graying, but his eyes looked clearer and more honest. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness," Rodriguez said, "but I want you to know that I think about what I did every day. I'm trying to spend the rest of my life making up for it." Jonathan studied the former officer's face. "What are you doing now?" "I work with kids in the inner city. I try to teach them that police officers should be people they can trust, not people they should be afraid of." "That's good work," Jonathan said. Rodriguez nodded. "My own children are ashamed of what I did, but I hope that someday they'll be proud of what I'm doing now." They stood in silence for a moment, watching people come and go from the community center. "Mr. Blackwood, can I ask you something?" Rodriguez said. "Of course. Why didn't you try to destroy me completely? You had the power to ruin my life forever. Instead, you just wanted me to face consequences and learn from my mistakes." Jonathan thought about the question. Because destroying you wouldn't have helped anyone. The goal was never revenge. The goal was change. As the sun began to set, Jonathan walked back to his apartment. But instead of taking his usual route, he walked through the neighborhood where he had spent 3 months living on the streets. The area looked completely different now. There were new streetlights and clean sidewalks. A new homeless shelter had been built where an abandoned building used to stand. Police officers walked regular patrols, but now they stopped to talk to people instead of just moving them along. Jonathan passed the spot where he used to sleep on a park bench. A small plaque had been installed there. It read, "In memory of all those who are forgotten, may we always remember to see the humanity in everyone." He sat on the bench for a few minutes thinking about his daughter. He wished she could see what her foundation had accomplished. 12 community centers. 30,000 people helped. Police departments in 15 cities reformed their training programs. But the thing he was most proud of was something that couldn't be measured in numbers. People were paying attention now. Homeless individuals were no longer invisible. Police brutality was being taken seriously. Politicians were being held accountable. His phone buzzed with a text message from Margaret. Stock price hit an all-time high today. Investors love the foundation. Board meeting tomorrow to discuss expanding internationally. Jonathan smiled and put his phone away. A year ago, he would have been excited about the stock price and the international expansion. Now those things seemed less important than the text message he had received earlier from Tommy. Helped 3 people find jobs today. 2 more got into housing. Keep up the good work, boss. As Jonathan walked home, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The pain of losing Sarah would never completely go away. But her death had led to something meaningful. Her memory was now helping thousands of people who had been forgotten by society. He stopped at a newsstand to buy a newspaper. The headline read, "Blackwood Foundation credited with 40% decrease in police brutality cases." Below that was a smaller headline, "Homeless population down 25% in cities with Blackwood programs." The old man running the newsstand recognized him. "Mr. Blackwood, good to see you. You know, my nephew was homeless for 2 years. Your foundation helped him get back on his feet. He has a job now in his own apartment." "That's wonderful," Jonathan said. "What's his name?" "David Martinez. He works at one of your community centers now, helping other people like he used to be." Jonathan smiled. He didn't know David personally, but he had probably met hundreds of people like him over the past year.